So I just want to start off by saying thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us for this hour. With that said, I'm going to go over some housekeeping rules so that everyone feels comfortable and confident. I cannot express enough. I want to hear from you throughout this next hour. You could have been anywhere else, but you're deciding to be with us. So with that said, I've muted everyone upon entrance just to avoid background noise, but please feel free to come off mute whenever you want to share your voice. Write in the chat box when you've got something to say. I'll flag that to our guest speakers. If you have any sensitive information and you want to be kept anonymous, feel free to find me in the chat box under Mariella and write to me anonymously. I'll flag that to our guest speakers. Invisibility. So I know that maybe some of you haven't taken a shower today. Maybe there's a lot of things going on in your background, but there's no judgment here. Put your virtual backdrops on, come on camera. We believe in visibility. If you feel called to do so, please turn your cameras on and then hop off of mute whenever you feel free to do so.
We lost Mariella.
Yeah, I think we did. I wasn't sure if it was maybe just on my end, but I'm sure it should be back in a moment.
So sorry for this, guys. My name's Meg. I'm also part of the Power to Fly team. So Mariella will sign back in here in just a minute. As soon as she does, we will get going. But while we're waiting, I'm just going to make sure everybody's still hooked up. Is there anybody from the speaker panel that we're missing right now?
No, we are all here.
Looks good. Okay. So she'll be back, and I don't want to steal her thunder with giving all introductions and everything. But let's see. I can kind of run through the rest of the housekeeping stuff before she gets back. Just so everybody's aware, if you do come off mute, that's the only way you'll show up on the recording that we are live streaming to our website and we'll post on our website and on our YouTube channel. So you're still more than encouraged to participate. As long as you don't come off mute, you will not show up on the recording, no matter whether your video is on or off. If you want to participate, but you are, want to make sure that nobody knows that you're here, you are still more than welcome to participate by putting any comments or questions into the Zoom group chat. And then if you are in, let's say, deep cover and really can't have anybody know that you're here, you are more than welcome to send questions or comments directly to Mariella as soon as she gets back. And you can also send them to me as well. And what we'll do with those is you can send them, instead of sending them to everyone in the group chat, you can just send them directly to me and just use the drop-down menu to select. And that way we can raise your questions or comments to the speakers without anybody kind of being the wiser. If you do come off mute to participate, we again highly encourage this. Just know that if you're not actively speaking, you should make sure that you are still on mute. I'm going to be doing the same thing because I've got bulldogs snoring under my desk. But if I do mute you or if Mariella mutes you, it's not a rebuke. It's just to maintain audio clarity for everybody. So just make sure you're kind of aware of that. As we get started here, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, so the recording, like I said, today's session is going to be recorded. And as you do that, or as we record, if you want to kind of, don't feel like you have to take notes or anything, everybody that registered for today's session will get a link to the recording in their email. So whether you, aren't with us today, but you're joining, you're watching this later on, or if you stay with us for 3 minutes or stay with us for the full hour, everybody's going to get a link to rewatch. That link is always free to share. So please feel free, like you can, share some of the gems that you hear today with your friends or your coworkers or your, family or whatever you'd like. It's always going to be free to watch our videos. They'll be on our YouTube channel sooner. So if you don't want to wait the 1 to 2 days, you can feel free to check out our YouTube channel. We are at Power to Fly. Very highly encourage you to subscribe there. It's a really good way to make sure you don't miss out on any new videos. It won't clutter up your inbox. And it's a great way to make sure that, even if you don't get signed up or registered for something, you still are able to watch it as easily as possible. You're also welcome to keep up with us on the rest of our social channels. We are at Power to Fly on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And then, those are always great ways to get in touch with us. And then if you have any other questions, please feel free to tag me or Mariella in the Zoom group chat. Let's see, it looks like she's back sharing her screen again.
No, we have access to the slides, so perfect. I figured I would help out and share the slides so that way.
Thank you so much, Rochelle.
In case you forgot anything.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, because I was kind of scrambling in the background to get into the docs. So thank you for that.
No worries.
Now, I'm not sure who's up first in the deck as far as the introductions go. Okay, so
Yeah, we'll
I
take
apologize, I
Paquita.
wasn't paying close enough attention. Is it Paquita or Paquita?
It is Paquita.
Paquita, okay. So Paquita, Paquita is joining us as the Senior Associate Dean in the Zicklin School of Business at Baruch College. She's also a professor in the Stan Ross Department of Accountancy. She earned her PhD in accounting from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, right by near me. So thanks so much for repping the Midwest there. Before entering the PhD program, she was an auditor and a tax accountant for Deloitte and was certified in '92 by the state of Michigan as a public accountant. Paquita currently serves on the board of trustees of Pollyanna Inc., which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping institutions achieve their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. Welcome, Paquita.
Thank you, Mary.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to that introduction before we go to Rochelle?
No, let's keep going.
Okay. All right, so Rochelle is an associate professor of information systems in the computer science and information systems department in the College of Business at the University of North Georgia. She earned her PhD from UNC Greensboro, her MBA focusing in human resources, information systems, and a bachelor's in management and information systems from SUNY University at Albany. Rochelle is a postbaccalaureate mentor and a program scholar. She also works closely with KPMG's PhD project, specifically with the Information Systems Doctoral Student Association. So welcome, Rochelle.
Thank you.
All right, so as we get started here, we do have one more for Marie Zara. Marie is the Director of Advancement for the PhD Project, a systemic diversity initiative that encourages Black, African Americans, Latinx, Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans to pursue PhDs in business, creating role models and mentors for future generations of diverse leaders. Marie received a Bachelor's of Science from PACE in marketing with a concentration in advertising, and she holds a certificate in fundraising from NYU. In 2005, Marie joined the PhD project team when it was launched as a separate 501c3 by the KPMG Foundation. In this role, Marie is responsible for all development activities and donor relations. She works closely with PhD projects sponsoring corporations and universities, as well as individual donors. In addition, she oversees all marketing and communications and has worked closely with White House initiatives on Hispanic excellence in education on the PhD project's growing efforts to increase the number of mentors for this growing demographic. So welcome, Marie.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we start here, and Rochelle, thank you so much. Would anybody like to talk to us a little bit about the PhD project?
So I'd be happy to do that. So thank you everybody so much for being here and taking the time to learn more about us. The PhD project was started in 1994. It's a diversity initiative to really increase diversity in corporate America. That's our end goal. And we do that by doing it systemically and first diversifying the front of the classroom so that more students of color will be attracted to business programs and will succeed in business. We do focus on the major business disciplines. So you heard already, Paquita has an accounting PhD and she's an accounting professor. Rochelle is IS. And we also focus on the other major business disciplines, which are marketing, management, and finance and economics. We have 5 groups of support, which are for doctoral students while they're in their programs. And then we also have related faculty alumni associations for the faculty once they get their PhDs. What you have in front of you now is just the basic overall information, but you'll see that we do have an annual conference. It's taking place in just about 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks. Typically it's in Chicago. This year it's going to be virtual like everything else in the world. So we are beyond the point where you would be able to apply for this November, but once you learn more about us and about our incredible professors, then hopefully you'll be inspired to apply for next year because we have one each and every year and we've been doing this for 26 years. So I think that's the basic background information. I want to turn this over to my friends and colleagues and professors so that they can really share more of their stories.
Excellent, thank you so much. Okay, so I know we do have a list of the questions that people had asked. Rochelle, I did get into the presentation, so I'm more than happy to share my screen if you'd like.
Okay. Okay.
All right, let me move this over here. And then share. Okay. All right. So as we get going, I do want to drop quite quickly into our list of questions here. These are all questions that y'all had submitted prior to today's session. We very much appreciate this, and we tried to condense them into kind of a conversational format. We have, I believe, 2 slides of questions. So if you want to take a screenshot, you're more than welcome to. It'll kind of give you an idea of what we're going to try and cover. But if you are on the line with us today and you have a question, even if you pre-submitted it that you really want asked or answered, please, please, please understand that, you know, we give primacy to everybody who attends today. So please feel free that you can come off mute, ask questions, or add comments. This is the next slide of our questions here. I'll rest here for just a second. And again, as we get going, you are more than welcome to participate either vocally by coming off mute or by participating in the Zoom group chat. All right, so I'm going to address the questions to everybody, and feel free to jump in as you'd like to answer. Can you tell us a bit about why you all, or why some of you decided to get a PhD, and what was that decision process like?
I think I'm going to go first, and then I'll hand it over to Rochelle, and we'll go back and forth that way through the questions, unless there's something that's specifically unique to our disciplines. So I will say that I decided to get a PhD because someone suggested it to me. It is certainly not where I was headed when I got a bachelor's degree in accounting and ultimately a master's degree in accounting. I was planning to work in public accounting. This was in the early 90s. And like a lot of people, after that, I was going to go to law school. Well, I paid for my own college education, and so my professors at the University of Michigan, 2 of them in particular, called me into their office and said, "Have you ever thought about getting a PhD?" And I said, "Of course not. Who does?" And they took the time to explain to me a little bit about the parameters of a PhD and why they thought it was particularly important for me as a female underrepresented student at the University of Michigan at the time to think about getting a PhD. And they gave me an incentive to say that apply to several programs and look at my offers, and they would match any offer that I received and have me come to the University of Michigan. So that's why I went. And I have not regretted it a moment since. That was about 26 years ago now.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Rochelle, would you like to jump in here?
Sure. My process was a little bit more self-driven. I didn't have mentors that directly asked me, but I was in my MBA program, and they, at my university, they did have a PhD program, but it was in human resources. And my my MBA focused on human resources and information systems. And so I did consider it actually for my thesis. Instead of doing an in-field project, I did a thesis paper for my MBA. And at the time, I thought to myself, well, I'm not quite sure if this is really what I want to do. I had actually already, in my undergraduate, done a program called the Ronald McNair Postbaccalaureate Program, which is to encourage underrepresented minorities and to pursue a PhD. And I spent a summer working with an IS faculty member. And I remember after the end of that, I was like, oh, this is a lot of reading and writing. I don't think I want to do this. I don't want to do this. And so I said, you know, I know that I'm a good student, and I don't know if this is really what I want to do. So let me just go work, and then I will figure out what I really want to do. And so then I did. I was in New York at the time. I moved down south to Atlanta, and I worked here at an HR consulting company for about 4 years. But in those 4 years, I was always looking for something. I was challenged at first getting to, work like the first year or 2, but then after that, I just felt like there was more that my brain could do, more things that I could, do in my career and in my passion. So I was looking around at different opportunities. And that's how I came across the PhD project. So for me, the PhD project was vital because I actually went to the conference as an attendee in 2007. And it's such a, transformative conference, annual conference, where you hear from, people that look just like you, people who had, who are self-funding their education, people who didn't have anyone else in their family, let's say, or close network that had pursued a PhD or had a PhD, but they decided to do that, and how much of an impact they can have in the classroom with working with organizations and even in their own personal lives. And so after that, I was pretty revved. I actually started my doctoral program in 2010, which was 3 years later. And so students always, prospective candidates always ask me why, what was the 3-year gap for? Well, I was, studying for the GMAT at the time. And before I made this transition, I wanted to determine whether or not I would actually like to teach or stand in front of people and teach, and so I because I had an MBA, I applied, and I taught at a community college for about a year. And I really, even though I don't know how I did it now, but back then I was working 40 hours a week, and I was teaching at night and on the weekends, multiple classes. And I said, I really do think this is what I want to do. And so then I applied, and I went to the program at UNC Greensboro and focused on information systems. And a key point there, that I wasn't focused on HR like I thought I wanted, but really my passion I've always dabbled in technology and information systems, and going to the PhD project helped me, to the annual conference, helped me to make that decision between the two, to know that I could still pursue the types of research projects and just interest projects with information systems, as opposed to focusing in HR. So my decision process was definitely a long process. It didn't happen just when I said, hey, I think I want to do this. But yeah, that was pretty much what my process was like.
Amazing. And Marie, would you like to weigh in here as well?
Because I don't have a PhD myself, I can't really speak to that. But I can say that over the 26 years that we've been doing this, we have over 1,300 faculty now who have gone through that process and made that decision. And really, there's such different paths. I mean, we have folks coming through that are in graduate schools, some straight from undergrad, although that's more unlikely. And for the most part, we tend to work with people who are in the workforce, in the corporate world, or even in other areas outside of business. And they come to our conference and they explore getting a PhD and just see if it's the right fit. So there's really no straight path, at least that we're aware of. So it's something that, if you're a lifelong learner, if you really are very inquisitive and you want to just always be looking to answer questions and find out more in research, then and give back, of course, to students and your community, it's really a great career.
I think it's so important to highlight that, that it's not always a linear path, and the path doesn't always look the same. I feel like we're not, kind of in the infancy of the internet and of Instagram and just seeing, the results of someone's hard work, and not necessarily the struggle, but the journey that led there. But we are seeing more and more of the non-traditional student, or the non-traditional, deviations from what people might think of as the way you do this, the way you become a doctor, the way you get a PhD, and seeing that there are many different roads to get there. Our next question I found particularly interesting, and apologies, Marie, for feeling like we kind of are excluding you with some of these, at least early on. But for Rochelle and Paquita, what was the hardest part of pursuing a PhD for you? And have you ever wanted to pivot from your initial research focus?
So a PhD program is a full-time job, in the sense that you take classes, and when you aren't in class, you're reading, you're thinking, you're developing ideas. And I think that maybe because I didn't have the PhD project when I started my PhD program, I didn't have a full awareness of what I was getting into. So I'm thrilled and grateful that the PhD project came along while I was in the program, and that helped me to network with others to have a better understanding. But I would say that the hardest part for me was not having a full grasp of exactly what I was going to be getting into. And in particular, even though I had an undergraduate and master's degree in accounting, the PhD in accounting, which is the one that I chose, is also very quantitatively focused, but in a different way. There's accounting math, and then there's statistics and econometrics and economics. And so really digging down deeply to understand that. And in the process, I ended up getting an extra master's degree in economics to really get a deeper understanding of the research methods that I would need to get the PhD. So that was one of the most challenging parts for me. And with regard to research, I had worked as an auditor on understanding the obligation for pensions and post-retirement benefits. And I went into my PhD program thinking that that's what I would do research on. But over time, I developed an interest in international accounting research. And that's what I ended up focusing on for my dissertation. I later came back and did some work on the pensions and the work that I'd learned as an auditor. But I think what I learned is that you can have multiple interests and just find different ways to approach them throughout the PhD program process.
So I can just second Paquita's statement about not quite grasping, you know, the what it actually entails pursuing a PhD. I know that you know, as I say, you know, when I went through my undergrad, I felt like, okay, I have a pretty good handle on this. And the MBA program, a little more challenging, but I think, you know, I was able to manage it relatively well. But then, you know, starting a PhD project, I mean, a PhD program, after you've been sort of out of that school mode for a while, it definitely is a little bit of a shock to the system. And I think that, I remember there were times where I would hear things in the class, and certain classes you take with your cohort, which are people who are just starting with you. And then there are other classes you take with people who are 2 years ahead of you, a year ahead of you, et cetera. And I remember I used to always joke because we would have these articles we had to read. And I literally would spend like 2 hours on like the first page and be like, I still don't really know what I just read. It's in English. I know these words individually, but when you put all these words together, they're not making sense to me. And I think that, you know, it's scary, you know, because you think to yourself, wait, what did I just, you know, I was really comfortable. I had a job, you know, I knew what I was doing, but now here I am putting myself, you know, taking a risk, putting myself back into this position of not knowing. But that's something that you have to be willing to embrace and take that challenge. And so you just have to, you know, ask questions and try to dig deep to understand what it is you're trying to learn. And it is different than, you know, going through undergraduate or MBA. It's different because to what Paquita was saying, the type of methods and things that you're learning, these are things you're actually going to apply in the future in your career. Like, so it's a different level of dedication and determination to make sure you understand it in a way that you haven't necessarily done before. But what the good thing is that the PhD project, in addition to the conference and the doctoral student associations, what happens is that you start to connect with other people who are going through the same thing or went through the same thing already. So you have someone that you can kind of reach out to ask questions to if you kind of feel a little uncomfortable at your school because you don't, you know, the reality is that there's a, you know, there is some level of pressure to the extent that you don't want, you know, it's fine to be learning, but you also have to be, you know, mindful of the appearance that you're giving, right? So even if you're studying hard and you're like, man, I really don't get this, it's okay that you don't, but maybe you don't necessarily want to ask someone at your school. Maybe you want to reach out to someone who is a mentor or someone that you've connected with through the project, and you can ask that question and feel comfortable and knowing that there's no judgment and that we're here to help support you through that and provide you with the right resources. And, you know, and it's okay, you know, to be unsure. And if you have those questions and those doubts, to reach out to them. And so, yeah, I think the hardest part, to sum up, the hardest part for me was the unknowing, like just not knowing and kind of feeling like you're, you know, a little bit outside of your depth. I remember as a student, we used to joke and say, well, I'm just going to keep showing back up. And until someone taps me on the shoulder and says, you need to go, we'll just keep showing back up. And then specifically with the initial research focus, I did my dissertation working with nonprofit organizations and how they utilize technology. And though I'm not focusing on the same question, I still do have a passion for working with nonprofit organizations or non-traditional organizations like micro enterprises. I do research like on Etsy using econometrics. Not that I do the methodology for that particular study. I partner with a colleague from my doctoral institution to do that type of research. And so, you know, you can have an interest in a number of different research areas. And that good part is that you get to kind of drive your agenda as a faculty member.
Yeah, the uncertainty thing really rings for me. I went to a year of law school before realizing this was not where I should be. And I had so many moments, granted it's legalese, which is like already kind of like Greek, but yeah, like so many moments where I'm reading the same page or the same paragraph or the same sentence. I'm like, I know this is in English. I know these are all words. Why do I not make sense of this? And how on earth am I ever going to apply this if I can't even figure out the words on the page? So that sense of kind of being unmoored and having that freedom, which is great, but also a bit scary to direct where you're learning. It's intoxicating and scary. All right, so Mariella is back on the line, but before I hand it over to her, I'm gonna get us started with one more question, then we're gonna swap over screens and all that. So our next question asks, how do you weigh giving up your current salary to begin a PhD program? And how did you address having a steady income to pay bills while studying?
I would say that, again, we talked about the fact that there are multiple paths to getting to a PhD. Very rarely do, especially in business, people leave undergraduate school and go on and get a PhD. So most people do have under their belt some years of work experience and hopefully some savings. That being said, though, PhD programs pay you. Accredited, established PhD programs do not charge PhD students tuition. Instead, you get tuition waivers for working as research assistants for faculty members, and you get a stipend. And the stipends vary depending on the level of support that the school can provide. But on average these years, we're talking about between maybe $20,000 to $30,000 stipend and then a tuition waiver. So knowing that that's what you're going to have to live off of, depending on which institutions you target, I think it's just part of the planning. And Rochelle described this years-long process, and I'm imagining that along the way, she was socking away her spending money so that she could go into this lifestyle knowing, not having to worry about the financial part of it, because you do get the stipend, but certainly it's not the same as working full-time in the professions. So know that you're not going to pay for a PhD. Tuition is waived. You're going to get a stipend. The stipend won't be the same as your salary, but having a little bit of a plan ahead of time will do it. I did happen to go to the PhD program fairly young, so I hadn't even begun to understand how to live well. So that helped a little bit too.
Yes, I second that as well. I did go, the part about giving up your current salary, at the time when I came out from my MBA program and I moved to Atlanta, it was I think it was like the year before the Great Recession started, and before anyone knew the Great Recession was starting. And so, salaries were, job opportunities, a lot of things were not as abundant as they, were well before that and afterwards. And so for myself, I looked at the salary, I guess, but I also knew that I just was not thrilled with the way in which I was being mentally challenged in what I was doing. And for me, I valued happiness a lot. And also, I just I knew that there was more that I could do. And at the time, I was like, if I don't do it now, later on, it's going to be harder for me to make that change, because I was young at the time. And so then I said, yeah, I think I'm just gonna, make it. And it's great. I remember having a conversation with my family and like, yeah, I'm gonna quit my job and go back to school for a PhD. And they're like, great. Like I guess you seem like you know what you're doing. It's a strange thing to do, but sometimes you just have to be comfortable in what you're doing. I do want to talk about the second part of that question, which I think is it's a good part. And it really is something that you have to consider. Yes, I did save. And on top of that, I did go on a couple of vacations because I knew that I wanted to be very dedicated when I was in the program, and that I wouldn't necessarily have the flexibility to kind of just, pick up and leave, even though you do have some level of flexibility, but I just wanted to be more focused. But I remember having a conversation with my department chair at the time when I went to the what the stipend. And I said, oh yeah, the letter says it's a 9-month stipend. So I was like, what do I do for the other months? And he's like, well, we expect for you to, budget accordingly for those 9 months to spread out over the year. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I just the concept of going from in corporate where you earn a paycheck every 2 weeks, or well, yeah, it's typically mostly every 2 weeks, to academia where you get one check a month and you have to adjust. And it was an adjustment period. I started using a spreadsheet to make sure that I knew, that I would be able to make it last. But then there were opportunities at the school, which also allowed for me to be able to work over the summer doing research, to be able to earn grants. I, earned a couple of different ones that allowed for me to kind of make up that gap. But yeah, it is something that you do have to take into consideration. And if you are considering it, like I really do encourage you to save accordingly so that you can at least have a little bit of a cushion, especially in that first year. Afterwards, it levels itself out. But that first semester, having to move and having to make those adjustments, you definitely want to have a little bit of a financial cushion.
And speaking of flexibility, I just want to say thank you to everyone. My internet went out for a little bit, but I'm so happy that we've got the Power to Fly team ready to recuperate and jump in. So thank you, Meg. And Paquita, sorry to cut you off. I'd love to hear more about what you have to say.
No problem. I was just going to say that we're probably noticing now in this environment, working from home or working remotely, that living differently causes you to have different expenses. Living like a student is not the same as going to work, having dry cleaning, having commuting costs, buying lunch every day. Living like a student is less expensive than living like a person working in corporate America, to be fair. And I mean, if you have fixed costs like mortgages and those things, depending on how invested you are, you sell the house and you live in campus housing or family housing. But just saying, living like a student is certainly a different set of costs than living in the corporate setting.
Right. And a lot of times, if there are people who are considering it, who are married or who have children, pursuing a PhD is not something you're going to do on your own. It's a family decision. But the PhD project has a really great session. The annual conference has a really great session on, I forgot what it's called, Marie, but it's a family session.
Yeah, the work-life balance, or balancing life, work and life.
Right. And what it focuses on a lot is, how, if you have a family, if you have a significant other, if you have children, if you have a mortgage, how do you manage that if you're interested in making this transition? There are people who have been in the program who have been able to do that with, a significant other, with children. There have been people who've gotten married in the program, people who have had children in the program. All these things happen. As I always tell students, life happens while you're in school, whether it's in undergrad or whether it's in a doctoral program. Life happens. So it's just a matter of you trying to focus on what's important and focus on what needs to get done, and you'll always adjust accordingly.
And, I just want to mention that one thing that you need to keep in mind when you're looking at programs is you're not necessarily going to go to a school where you live right now. There aren't a lot of doctoral slots available. We work with about 120 universities throughout the US that offer doctorates in business, but depending on your research focus, the faculty that are at that institution that you'd be able to collaborate with, those all weigh into the program that you would select or would select you. So you need to keep that in mind. The good news is that if you live somewhere where the cost of living is very high, you might end up going into a program in an area that's less expensive, where you won't have the same sort of overhead that you have now. And you can also, certainly factor in, I know most people when they come to our conference, probably the first thing they're thinking about is how do they downsize? How can they scale back and, live like a student for anywhere between 4 and 6 years, depending on your program. The other thing I did want to mention, and, without getting into specific salaries, there is a really high demand for business school professors, especially for diverse business school professors. All of our members, once they're getting ready to defend and go out onto the market, usually have positions already in line, and they all pay, they're all 6-figure incomes. So while you are definitely sacrificing for those years that you're in a doctoral program, you will end up getting, a great job when you get out, making a good salary, and, kind of catching up for that lost time, hopefully.
And I would just say, Marie, if anyone wants to know what the payoff might be, the AACSB, The Association to Accredit Collegiate Schools of Business publishes average salaries by discipline or by different types of universities. So if you want to get a sense of it, you can look at the AACSB.
I just want to say one thing. I know that we are definitely getting very into the details about the PhD, pursuing a PhD and how, financially it's going to work itself out. But I would encourage you to not let that be a deterrent from you considering it, because at the end of the day, you're going to continue to make sure that you and your significant others, the people that are important to your life, you're going to make sure that you're financially okay. But at the end of the day, the time is going to pass, right? And so if this is something that you really want to pursue, if this is something that you've always thought about or always wanted to do, don't let these types of questions that are important and will be addressed, don't let those be the things to stop you from really pursuing something that you might be passionate about and that you would be really good at with regards to impacting those in the classroom, those in the workforce, those at other companies, et cetera. So I know that it is important, but I also want to encourage you to not let that be a deterrent. Yes, it's important and you can definitely talk about it, but don't lose sight of the fact that pursuing the PhD, being in front of that classroom and impacting students, that has a value to it as well.
Absolutely. And we've got folks in the chat box singing your praises here. Malise writes, I'm so grateful for the transparency of the speakers, so insightful. And I'm just going to flag a couple of things that folks are writing in the chat box and would love to hear your responses. So Tisha writes, if you have a mortgage, kids, a spouse, etc., nothing can prepare you for the salary loss. Perhaps considering flexible part-time work may be the reality. Dr. Jake writes, I totally relate to this conversation. This is the time to collaborate on research and find a sponsor. I had to find a secondary source of revenue. And Adrian writes, depending on your research stream or area of the country, there are additional fellowships available to help supplement your stipend. I'd love to hear you all respond on those comments.
That those are absolutely true. So again, depending on your discipline, for example, I am an accountant, so I applied for an AICPA fellowship that supplemented the stipend that I received from the University of Michigan at the time. It's extremely hard to think about, somebody mentioned flexible part-time work, especially in the early parts of it, as Rochelle and I have talked about. A PhD is a full-time job, and so you're really putting a lot on yourself to think that you could do that and something else. But there are other fellowship opportunities available. And in addition, Marie, I sure can tell you about what the PhD project offers as well.
Yes, I do want to second that as well. At my university, I was actually able to apply for, we had a diversity and inclusion fellowship that I was able to get, I think for the first 2 or 3, if not all 4 years, I can't remember, of my program, because I, at my university, was the first and the only, at the time, we've had more now, African-American PhD, doctoral student in my program at all. And so that was why I was able to sort of, you have to write an essay and everything like that to get some additional support while I was in the doctoral program. So yeah, there are different scholarship opportunities out there. I do know of people who I think used to do, he said, a second stream of revenue. Like, I know that people did that. I know I didn't have any time because I was, if I wasn't studying, I was also writing. And then in the, you still have to live. And, and I think I had maybe half a second to go to a park or ride a bike or something, to have a stress relief. Actually, I started doing kickboxing while I was in the doctoral program. So you have to still do something, for your mental and physical health. So when you add all that together, there's only so many hours in the day. So I knew for me that working wasn't an option. So I just downsized. My family will always laugh because I was notorious. In my doctoral program, I did not have cable. I was not using cable. I had no TV. But I mean, given the way, it's funny because that was back then. Now a lot of people don't, and it's sort of like, oh, that's how the future is. But back then I consciously did that because I was like, why would I pay for that when I know I should be studying, or I can use the internet. So there are different ways that you can definitely readjust your life and your lifestyle to be able to support it.
Absolutely. Marie, did you want to chime in there?
No, well, thank you both. Those are, all great points. And you're right. Definitely don't, if this is something you're interested in doing, don't let these, the salary or lack of a salary, don't let those be deterrents. I marvel every year that we have this conference that there are all these people actually thinking about doing this crazy thing, and they do it. So, don't let that be a deterrent. I should clarify, the PhD project does not provide any direct funding. I'm sure that's a question you might be wondering about. All of the funding that we receive goes to running the conferences. Well, it goes to marketing and outreach, and so that we can talk to people about getting a PhD and spark that interest, but then also to run conferences throughout the year. As I mentioned, as we've talked about, there's the big conference in November, which is for prospective students, and then 5 that are discipline specific once you start your program. And we have found that, the other stuff kind of works itself out, but having that support group that Paquita and Rochelle both have referred to really is what is the secret to getting through a program. The other stuff kind of falls into place, but you really need people to turn to that will help guide you, that will help mentor you, that will help you with your research. And that's, what we primarily provide. And I just want to mention that I know Adrienne Randolph is participating. She's also a PhD project member. So, certainly, Adrienne, feel free to unmic and chime into any of these questions. I know you're contributing in the chat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's a nice moment I'll hold for a brief pause. If someone wants to hop off of mute and voice any questions or responses, I'll just hold for a light pause now for you to do that. All right. If not, I will continue with what's happening in the chat box. So we have Dr. Barnes here that writes, this is awesome. I wish I'd known about the PhD project years ago. I just completed my Doctor of Business Administration. Congratulations. With the concentration in management in August. Degree arrived in the mail last Saturday. I found this project from a colleague 2 months ago. This is still powerful. And he sends thank you to everyone. So great. I'm so happy that we have all of this dialogue happening in the chat box. Let's move on to this next question here. In addition to opportunities in academia, are there any other roles or positions that became available to you after obtaining your doctoral degree?
That probably varies by discipline, but I would say, for example, in addition to being a full-time employee at my academic institution, the City University of New York, I am a KPMG national instructor. So because of my expertise in accounting, I help deliver continuing professional education to accountants. And I'm thrilled to say that in that role, I came across a KPMG employee who was so happy with the experience that he eventually applied to get a PhD and just graduated a couple of years ago. So it sort of continues in this circle. But certainly once you have a PhD, you have a level of expertise that is in demand, either on a consulting basis or certainly in other fields. I would say that most PhD programs, the goal is to place the graduates into academic institutions, but certainly there are fields and disciplines where the graduates go on. We just hired someone actually at my institution who has a PhD in operations management, and he worked for Lyft. He helped write the models to schedule drivers and passengers, but now he's going to be a professor of operations management in our management department. So yes, there are lots of opportunities. Hopefully though, we'll think about academia first.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I just recently earned tenure this year, so I'm now looking for other opportunities and things that I might want to pursue. But academia has always been my first passion and interest, and so that's sort of where my experiences have lied. However, in information systems, there's a wide variety of opportunities. In addition to being in the classroom, there are individuals who have been in the classroom and have gone to work for corporate organizations, IBM, Microsoft, et cetera. One of the things that I really do like is that as an academic, you can partner with them and still be an academic. So you can work with these organizations, you can do research with them. I know LexisNexis in Alpharetta out here has a partnership with my university as well. And so there's a whole host of opportunities. So if you are saying, I'm interested in not just doing academia, but some other things, you can pursue those in that academic role, or you can pursue that as well. But to Paquita's point, the goal is to get you the PhD so you can get in the classroom, so that you can be that figure, that mentor to those individuals who may have never had an experience with someone with your unique background, and encourage them to pursue opportunities in business. But you're definitely not limiting yourself. You're just creating more opportunities by pursuing the PhD.
Maria, do you want to chime in on that?
Well, I do. Actually, what I'd like to do is ask Adrian, if you don't mind, to talk about what you do, which is within academe, but it's definitely different than I think what most people would think of in the academic environment.
Hi, everybody. I was not trying to steal anyone's thunder on this incredible panel, but thank you for welcoming me on. So I direct a research lab called the Brain Lab, and as an information systems professor at Kennesaw State University, I do what's called brain-computer interface research. So it is on the more technical end, but it's very interdisciplinary, helping people literally control computers using just their thoughts. But we also use that technology to understand what you're thinking. So things that you may not be able to readily communicate, we can find out from your brain and your body.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Yes, I mean, everyone is like, what? I'd love to know more. So how can we find or support your work offline when we end this chat? We'd love to know more.
Oh, thank you. An easy way to get in touch is you can email brainlab@kennesaw.edu. So BRAINLAB and Kennesaw, KENNESAW. And looking for partners. So active ongoing research for all levels of graduate students and undergraduate students, and looking for relevant work as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for hopping off mute, Marie. Thanks for inviting Adrian to hop off of mute there. Did anyone else want to chime in before we move on to the next question? All right. So let's move on to the next question here. What piece of advice do you have for a successful PhD application for someone who is going to apply? I'm 30 years old with an MBA, but no research experience.
So this is a great question. The application is going to be most successful the more research that you put into understanding what your goals are. And so by research, I mean starting with thinking about what discipline you want to be in. And you don't have to have research experience or know exactly the type of research that you want to do, but having some sense of it is a little helpful to picking the institution. So for example, I'm in accounting. My institution has a ton of fantastic people who do research in financial reporting and auditing and cost accounting. We're a little bit lean on the tax side though. So you wouldn't want to apply to my school necessarily to get a PhD in taxation just because you're not going to have the faculty there to support you. So doing a little bit of legwork ahead of time, understanding which discipline and your interest will help you focus on the school that's right for you. And in that research process, it'll help you write your application, because part of the application is a research or is a personal statement explaining what your goals are. So having done the research to say something like, well, I want to apply to the City University of New York Zicklin School because I want to work with Paquita Davis Friday and do research on pensions, which no one wants to do, of course. But just to say that would be the thing that would help the application, those who are evaluating your application know that you've done the legwork, you understand what your goals are, and you understand that you're applying to a school that can help you meet those goals. So I would say that the most successful applicants have indicated that they understand that a PhD involves research, and that the school to which they're applying has the faculty to support the research interest of the applicant.
And Rochelle, did you want to chime in as well?
So it might be that you don't have any research experience. When I applied, I did have some that I had done in that program, the Ronald McNair program, where after I did it, I said I wasn't interested in research, and that's now what I do full time. But, when you're applying, sometimes you really just don't know. And that's where the PhD project annual conference is really helpful. They give you this large binder, and it has all the different schools and all the programs that are at these different schools. And so you can start to do, as Paquita said, the research to try to figure out generally what area you're interested in. A lot of times what experiences you already have, work experiences, help drive that direction as well. And it could just be your interest. Maybe you've looked at, sort of popular news and things that are going on in the world that you have just general questions about and you want to pursue. As Pakita said, the disciplines do vary. I know that with information systems, it's a wide range. We're still developing, knowledge in that area. And so there's a lot of unanswered questions that you can pursue. But if you're not sure, you can look and see at these schools that you're looking at, what research are those faculty members doing and what interests do they have? And that can help drive that as well. When it comes to one piece of advice, I will definitely say use the resources that are provided to you. So if you do connect with the PhD project, we have people who are willing to review your personal statements. We have people who are willing to give you some insight into the programs you might be interested in applying to. Definitely utilize that, because that can help to make the difference between, to help you make your application stand out. Don't forget, a lot of these are very competitive. They only have so many slots. And so you definitely want to make sure that your first effort is your best effort.
Awesome. And Marie, did you want to chime in as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that certainly it's really important in your applications to indicate your research interest and make sure it's clear that you understand that aspect of getting a PhD. But if you don't have a lot of research experience, I know that there are so many schools right now, universities that are offering pre-doctoral programs and different types of sessions that can help you to beef up your research before you start a program, either at the program that you're going into as a doctoral program or a separate program. We have a whole bunch that are listed right on our website.
Awesome. Thank you all. Well, I told you all that this hour was going to go by flying. So we've got about 7 minutes left. So I do want to open it up for questions. And I do want to flag this question here that Marcia has in the chat box. For both of our speakers, what are your views on receiving a doctorate of business administration if you're more interested in doing consulting and research versus academics?
So just to clarify, DBAs are typically, well, first of all, Harvard doesn't offer a PhD. For example, it only offers a DBA, a Doctor of Business Administration, and it is fully a research degree. So I think that your question is the distinction between a full-on research PhD versus maybe a Doctor of Business Administration, which might be more of an advanced graduate degree. And again, it just depends on what your goals are. At my school, we happen to offer a DBA to executives who are advanced in their careers and simply want to understand how to use data and the tools to be able to be more effective in their roles. So, neither is necessarily, one is not necessarily better than the other. It just depends on what your goal is to use it. If you want to be a professor in an institution or in a university, then typically it's the PhD that gives you the entree to do that. And we referenced the AACSB, which explains what schools have PhDs. The DBA, again, depending on the nature of the degree, if your goal is to be a consultant and to understand data, that can also get you there. So you need to think about what your goals are.
I second that.
Awesome. Thank you all for that. So Michelle here writes in the chat box, I got accepted into the November conference. Congratulations. Because it's virtual, what is the best way to network with others in this new format?
That's a Marie question.
I'm sorry. I just needed to unmute. So I think that I think the best way, well, what I was going to say is reach out to us and we will help to connect you with folks within our network that can help you. But just in general, I think it's interesting because we're kind of finding that this virtual environment is lending itself to networking a bit easier than we would have expected. Everyone is so open to finding time to chat. We have a little bit more time to chat now. And so I do think that it's a great opportunity to really connect with our members who might be able to help you further the goals that you have. And I mean, without getting too specific to the whole group, I can follow up with you directly. You can reach out to me directly, and then we can help kind of figure out the best way to connect you with some of our members that might be able to help guide you.
I'll just add to that and say that we have the discipline breakout sessions.
Mhm.
And so based off of your interest, you'll attend a breakout session, and you can attend more than one. So if you're interested, let's say in accounting and information systems, maybe you can attend the accounting one on one day, and then the next day attend the information systems one. And that's a inroad into being able to get connected to a network. Those who are on the panel there, the organizer, the moderator, these are ways that you can connect, and they can help to support you and answer certain specific discipline-specific questions that you might have. I know for myself, I connected with an individual at the conference I attended and asked a lot of questions and followed up via email, and that kind of helped as I was, going further after that. So the discipline breakout sessions will help.
Awesome.
You know what, I'm sorry, I'm going to add one more thing, but again, not to get too specific. Rochelle, you mentioned that we do provide a great deal of information at the start. And so the materials that you'll get will have information, email addresses for all of the presenters, all of the attendees, everyone that's there. So that as you're, navigating through the few days of the conference, you can also reach out directly to individuals along the way or follow up with them afterwards.
All right, so we've got about 2 more minutes. I want to try to get to this, at least one more question in the chat box, and then I'd love for you all to leave us with some food for thought. Let us know how we can connect with you all offline, because I do see that maybe folks will have more questions after they rewatch this video, for example. So for Morgan, she writes, how did you navigate the predominantly white institutions as a person of color? Rochelle talked about being able to reach out with actual questions to her PhD project cohort instead of calling on her professors or other students in the program. Any other advice?
I would just quickly say, first of all, I was actually approached by 2 white men to consider getting a PhD. So to be fair, you have to navigate. It's just true, especially in my discipline in accounting. I've had to do it at the accounting firm, not just in the PhD program. And then after that, I found and was able to connect with other people like me who were in the program because of the PhD project once it got started. So how did I navigate it? I started with the mentors, the people who introduced me to it, and then I found the network that the PhD project provided to help me prepare for exams, write papers, read what I was doing. So finding peers to help you.
I was going to say, I have to add to that, since I opened up that can of worms. I didn't intend to mean that you didn't feel comfortable because of race. Sometimes it could just be, you just don't feel comfortable. I mean, there could be a variety of reasons why. And what I will say is that I actually, with my cohort in the year that I was pursuing my doctorate program, there was an older white male. There was I say older as compared to my age at the time. And there was also an older white female, and then there was a Saudi Arabian female. And all of us, we had our own study groups for our stats classes so that we could make it through. And we all helped each other. So, I know that there's this concern about being at a, like I said, I was the lone African-American doctoral student at my university, but that didn't stop me from still making those connections. That didn't stop me from still being able to, do research with faculty members or engage with others who were from different backgrounds. It's just that sometimes you might have different questions. You might feel maybe more comfortable asking people from the PhD project network certain questions, but you have to, this is the world that we live in. You're going to have to be able to navigate relationships with people from all backgrounds, whether it's supervisors or people above you, or whether it's like students, or whether it's your colleagues at work. You're just going to have to navigate that. And so what the PhD project does is it just creates a safe space where you can ask and interact and be honest and be vulnerable. Maybe you're struggling with a class, maybe you're feeling overwhelmed. That's not something you normally would tell your colleagues. And so maybe you have that network person that you can be honest and vulnerable with. And the ones that I had said, okay, you can let it all out. Okay, good, get back to work. That's usually what the feedback would be anyway.
Awesome. Great. So we are at our time. I'd love for you all to share how we can stay connected with you all once we finish this chat. Marie, if you have any other highlights that you'd like to share before we end, so that we can hop over to support and to do more research on how we can become involved.
Yeah, so thank you everybody so much. And I want to direct everyone, certainly you can contact me directly with any questions you might have. I don't know, I'm sure you can share my email address to the group. I'll put it in the chat as well, but it's mzara@kpmg.com. And certainly any questions you might have about our, those of you who are attending our conference, if you have questions for this year, questions for next year, please feel free to reach out to us. And certainly in the roles that you're in, I'm not sure what everyone out there is doing, but if you're at a university, if you're involved with diversity, if there's any other points of connection, if you're involved with organizations that might be interested in working with us in other ways, please feel free to reach out to me. And if I'm not the right person, I'll direct you to the right person on my team. Thanks. Thank you all very much.
Yes, great. So if you were joining us live, you're going to get a rewatch email, and we'll make sure to put all of these great resources in the email so that you can, follow along and email our guest speakers as well. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for taking the hour to spend with us and learning and, encouraging everyone. So enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you on the next Chat and Learn. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.